Thank you.
Sure?
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get you. Well, we'd like to say, Mayor, members of the council, thank you for your support. Steve, directors, we appreciate all your support. Of course, none of this would have been possible with the commitment and support of each and one of the staff members. And again, thank you very much.
Now, we won't just leave it at that. We're going to praise you a little bit more. Councilmember Garcia?
Thank you, Mayor. I do want to recognize our team right here in the city as well. When residents, community, businesses, or council calls in a safety or a concern to our city manager, the staff is on it. They're out there on weekends and evenings addressing concerns here in our city. So we applaud your efforts. Thank you for upholding the quality of life in Pico Rivera. Thank you.
Very good. Mayor Pro Tem?
Everything that my colleague, Councilmember Garcia just said, plus thank you for working with our residents. You know, when you come across an issue that is out of line with code enforcement, please be gentle, please, you know, because sometimes there is that 70-year-old veteran who has a walkway that maybe they're not supposed to have, right? And it would take a lot of money to correct that. So I'm not saying that that's a particular instance, but things like that. So I appreciate your flexibility in working with our residents. Thank you.
Councilmember Camacho?
Yeah, I too echo the comments of my colleagues. Just thank you, for the great work and just keep improving the quality of life in our city. Keep up the great work. Thanks, guys.
And I just want to extend a round of applause to code enforcement. You know, the residents and the business owners expect the city to be safe and to improve year after year, and it's thanks to your efforts on the weekends, at nighttime, sometimes even during those twilight hours where you enforce our ordinances and keep our city safe and clean, and prevent any hazardous construction that may be occurring in the future and in the past. And of course, one of the things that people don't know, code enforcement actually helps residents and businesses alike with how to bring things up to code, not just enforce it. So we do appreciate your efforts again, and thank you. Big round of applause again. Now moving on to public hearings. At the moment, we have no public hearing for today's meeting. Now, the next item is public comment, and we do have one public comment, and that is from Lauren Talbot from the LA County Libraries with an update. Ms. Talbot?
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. My name is Lauren Talbot, and I'm the Community Library Manager at the Pico Rivera Library and the Rivera Library. We have some great programs coming up in October. LA County Public Health is hosting a vaccine clinic at the Rivera Library on Tuesday, October 17th from 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. Appointments can be made on myturn.ca.gov, but walk-ins are welcome. They will be offering the COVID vaccine, Mpox shot, and the flu shot. The Friends of the Pico Rivera Library will be having an all-day book sale on Wednesday, October 18th from 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. Please drop by to support our friends. Teens and tweens are invited to our Day of the Dead program on Thursday, October 26th at 4 p.m. at the Pico Rivera Library, where they will learn about this Latin American celebration and design a Dia de los Muertos nicho and other forms of art. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Talbot. And do we have, Madam City Clerk, any additional comments, whether email?
Not that they were received, Mayor.
Very good. All right. Now moving on to tonight's agenda. We have consent calendar items 1 through 9. And may we have a motion?
So moved.
All right. We have a first for Councilmember Camacho, a second, Councilmember Garcia. Madam City Clerk, roll call, please.
Councilmember Garcia,
Yes.
Councilmember Camacho,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lara,
Yes.
Mayor Lutz.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-0.
Very good. And next item is a city manager reports. And Mr. City Manager, I understand we have a legislative update.
Yes, Mayor, City Council. As you recall, the City Council directed staff to take a more proactive position when it comes to legislative matters. We actually have a representation on contract cities on the legislation advocacy. That is by Councilmember Gustavo Camacho. Jesus Garcia is here. He's our analyst. He's been doing a wonderful job for us, and tonight we'll just give you a quick update on some of the things we've been tracking, as well as some of the things we actually have been able to implement in our strategy, and I'll turn it over to Jesus.
Thank you very much, Mr. City Manager. Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Jesus Garcia, analyst here in the Office of the City Manager, providing you all with the legislative update. Next slide, please. So for the state session, for this session, we had over 3,000 bills introduced. That's probably breaking a record here in the state of California. And as you may be aware, next slide, please. September 14th was the deadline for the state legislature to vote bills out of the session. Is there a clicker? Let me see it. Apologies for that. It's a little technical difficulties.
They'll do it for you.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, thank you, Gabe. Appreciate that. So of the bills that, the 3,000 that were introduced in session, we had 800 go to the governor's desk. And he has until October 14th to either sign, veto, or pocket veto, which means he won't act on them, but they'll just silently die without taking a stance. On top of that, the staff was very active in trying to incorporate language in all of the climate bonds that were introduced. We were successful actually in incorporating our amendment language on the Senate side and in the Assembly side. In particular, we were looking to secure funding for communities that were considered park poor, or those that were to lose significant park space due to infrastructure projects. And that's the good news. We were successful in getting that in the bill. The unfortunate news is just given the legislative climate, the governor has kind of halted moving most of those bonds, given that there was going to be a lot of them already on the ballot. So our language did not, unfortunately, reach his desk. However, staff will be proactive, start of the next cycle, to make sure we're picking up where we left off and advocating for that language as getting more accommodations or more consideration for the city when it comes to park funding. And on the other end here, Contract Cities is starting to plan their Sacramento tour. You may have heard from them already. They're providing surveys and they're reaching out to their members. I understand Councilmember Camacho sits on the legislative committee. So that's just more of a flagging or highlighting it for your attention. And just some general highlights. So as you may be aware, we have new leadership in the legislative session. Senator Pro Tem Tony Atkins, well, no longer, is now transitioning to Senator Mike McGuire from the state of Eureka. So that will be the new leader in the Senate side. On the Assembly side, we are moving from Assemblymember Rendon to Assemblymember Robert Rivas. Leadership is transitioning more towards the central NorCal region of Southern California, of California. So we're working with our advocates to ensure what does this mean in terms of committee memberships, what does this mean for us in terms of the members of our delegation and our senators, so we're active in that pursuit. I wanted to highlight that since the adoption of the council-adopted legislative platform, we've been ramping up our efforts, and we submitted approximately 30 position letters to the Senate and Assembly this time around, including the amendment language that I mentioned earlier. So we're more actively submitting and getting involved in the process. Another thing to note was that despite the budget deficit that was announced by the governor at the start of the session, and the mention that it may be difficult to get direct funding for projects like we did previously, we were still able to secure $1 million thanks to the leadership of our council, as well as the Assemblymember Calderon for our Alebrije Dog Park, which again would be the first dog park in the city. We're eager to get that started, and we're thankful for the Assemblymember for their leadership there. We also have two things to highlight for the council. One being Assembly Constitutional Amendment 13. Really briefly what this is, it's a measure that passed out of the legislature to essentially counter The Taxpayer Protection and the Government Accountability Act, which this council acted to oppose, as it would impose further voter restrictions or increase the threshold for on cities or any entity that seems to want to increase their taxes, their fees, service delivery fees. ACA 13, what it would do on the ballot is for any measure that seeks to increase the voter threshold, it would need to also pass by that same voter threshold. So if the government accountability tax wants a 2/3 majority approval to increase taxes, it also needs to pass by a 2/3 majority. So it's kind of a little game of chess there, and expect to see that on your 2024 ballot. Finally, just something to highlight for folks is something that's going on in the California Supreme Court. This is concerning a issue raised by the Pico Neighborhood Association, not Pico Rivera, Pico in Santa Monica. And it concerns at-large voting systems. That group brought up the fact that they believe they were not being accurately represented in a at-large voting system. To summarize, the Supreme Court reviewed the case and pushed it back to the appeals court to re-argue the California Voting Rights Act. So no decision yet, but it can have some impact on at-large voting systems. So on the state side, just providing a snapshot of the bills that we have been actively monitoring as staff that impact city operations. Some that you'll notice here that already got signed by the governor actually, for example, would be AB 1484, which would allow temporary employees to be included in bargaining. Same with AB 413, which was just signed today, which would prohibit local governments from essentially regulating parking within 20 feet of an intersection. That's meant to be like a bicycle or pedestrian improvement measure, just because, you know, it creates blind spots. Another thing that was approved of was AB 701, which I believe is a positive, is it would impose additional fines or sentencing enhancements for folks that are convicted of any convictions with fentanyl. Given the current situation, I believe that might be a deterrent. Another one that's worth noting for you all is SB 58. So the city took an opposed position on this. It was to decriminalize certain psychedelic substances like mushrooms or other, psychedelic substances that are meant to, I guess, promote mental health treatments. The governor vetoed that. Another one is SB 602, Senator Archuleta's bill, which would extend letters of agency to 12 months rather than their current process of being 30 days. What this is it allows folks to, it allows local governments to work with law enforcement to gain access to like abandoned properties that may require some sort of mitigation or hazard mitigation. Rather than going back every 30 days, a letter will now be active for 12 months. So we thank the senator for that. I believe that's it on this end, but we can definitely speak to any bill that the council may have further questions on. On the federal side, really briefly, we've been very active in working with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as well as our federal officers to ensure that we submit, we work with Senator Alex Padilla as well as the late Senator Dianne Feinstein in submitting a directive or request for a directive in the 2024 WRDA asking the Army Corps to plan, design, and build public access, will maintain access to the Pico Rivera Sports Arena. That was an item that the City Council was very concerned and wanted to make sure that we were working with the Army Corps to ensure access to the sports arena. Second was, while we were submitting that request, we also asked that WRDA consider appropriating or directing $125 million direct funding to Pico Rivera to mitigate some of the impacts. Well, not mitigate, but to address the impacts of that project. Mitigate is a legal word, so it means other things. And finally, we're working actively with Congresswoman Linda Sanchez as the House version of the same bill will be open soon. Well, given the current environment in the federal government, that might take a minute. However, we're actively monitoring that situation and working with our advocates. Generally, just 4 things I'll highlight for you all. The city, thanking our city manager and our city council, as well as the hard work of our director of innovation and communications. We submitted a proposal under the US ADA technology program to establish our micro EV transit hub here in Pico Rivera. We know that was a topic of discussion when the delegation visited Washington, D.C., so we immediately turned around and prepared a proposal with strong regional support, and we'll be monitoring the outcome of that application. Second, we're actively working with Congresswoman Sanchez as well as the Armed Services divisions to address the issues with that Army Corps base. We understand that the residents are concerned, especially with the lack of maintenance, the hazard it imposes. So staff are continuing to push that and making sure that some resolution, whether it's provided to the city or just some sort of maintenance agreement, can arise from this. Third, we'd like to highlight that thanks to the Office of Congresswoman Sanchez, we were chosen for a congressional funding directive for the Los Paseos project as part of the historic Whittier Boulevard program. So that's $850,000 that are going towards that project, which we're extremely excited about. And finally, this was brought up to us by the California League of Cities as well as contract cities. At the federal government, they're looking at amending what is known as the civil asset forfeiture rules, which are Fifth Amendment rules. In summary, on law enforcement and when they work with federal agencies or sometimes just local task forces, if they were having to acquire, let's say, assets, money, contraband, they are able to acquire some of that and use it to fund services within law enforcement. So in the federal government, they're looking to potentially amend that or change the way that law enforcement is able to retain some of those. We understand there's been cases of abuse in some areas. So this has been brought up to the federal government as an area to observe, but we're also closely monitoring it as we know a lot of local agencies also rely on the funding that comes from this provision. So that about sums it for our state and federal updates. I'm available to answer any questions, and we'd like to close this presentation in memory of the late Senator Dianne Feinstein.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you for that presentation. To my colleagues, any comments, questions?
Oh.
Yes, Councilmember Camacho.
Yeah, definitely. First of all, I just want to thank Mr. Garcia for a great job, not only today, but as you've been analyzing a lot of these legislative bills. As was mentioned, California Contract Cities represents 80 cities in California advocating for local control, land use, amongst many other things. And as a former president and former chair of the legislative committee, and I still sit on the executive board and the legislative committee, I was able to look at these bills and work with contract city staff and decipher a lot of this stuff that would impact our city. But now, thanks to you, Steve, for bringing someone on board that has added that value, and you get to break it down a little bit more so. And so thank you for that. You've definitely done a great job there. But it's important to highlight, and I'm glad we did, because as was recognized, the positions we take here from our city perspective is pretty straightforward. It's a lot about local control, land use planning. You know, before 10 years ago, we were able to do a lot more in keeping the character of our cities as we were given the laws in place from the state government at the time. But so much has changed since that has really put us in a position where high-density housing is being implemented. So this idea of, you know, your single-family residence, which now, as we're dealing today, good or bad, you know, if you support it or not, you have garage conversions, you have ADUs, we have quite a few in the pipeline with very minimal parking restrictions. Those are the new legislation that's taking place in Sacramento. And we don't make those laws. We got to follow these laws. So it's great for us to continue monitoring how these local control laws that have come about are affecting and will affect the future makeup and the character of our city and many other cities throughout California. So a lot of the positions that we take is based on that. You know, there are many bills that benefits us too as well, that we support and have said not get engaged when the bill's already getting signed, but rather when there's amendments to be done, and we've been instrumental to that. So once again, just commentary, but we gotta definitely be on top of it. Sacramento, this legislative tour is coming up. I think we should all go up, just like we went to DC. And but a lot going on, and the monitoring of these bills, and in the federal level, being able to now get a lot of funding from both our senators and our congressional members for a lot of projects that we're working on right now. So that activeness, that proactive legislative approach can help us plan for the future based on new laws, whether we like them or not, or, you know, be able to take advantage of legislation and our funding out there that we're able to fund projects that we need for our community. So thank you for that.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. I just want to echo the comments by my colleague, Councilmember Camacho. There's really a lot to say about the work that you've done, the work that our administration team has done in terms of trying to keep abreast on a lot of these issues. I know we've done some things from the council side to help you with that. I believe there was a program that was purchased that tracks language in a lot of these bills, right? Because you mentioned there's 3,000 that were submitted.
That's correct.
It's just really impossible to be able to go through all the details of those bills to see which ones were going to affect us, so that when we use computer-based learning like that, that flags things and it bubbles things up, right? So that we need to pay attention to these things more. That's one thing we've done. Second thing was bringing you on board, because, we've seen you work up in Sacramento at this year's Contract Cities legislative tour when we went as a group. We've seen your work firsthand, and we've been always impressed with that. So I want to transition just from talking from what you've done, what the team has done, and I want to say that a lot of these items that you presented to us are very diverse, right? There's things regarding mass transit, there's items regarding our parks, there's funding, but it's very strategic in terms of a lot of these big ticket items, right? This whole idea about climate resiliency bonds, making that play and making that language, those are 10 steps ahead of the game, right? Because we're trying to put in, right, when there's money, when there's years of surplus, you go after the money, right? And we did that, and we were successful with that. But then there's years of no money, so then you go after the language, because you know that there's always going to be spending taking place, whether it's upfront or whether it's by way of bonds or another measure. It's a matter of how do we position our community to be at the front of the line so that we make sure that we're getting those dollars. And we continue to give Public Works a lot of work, well, more backlog, right? So I just want to thank you for giving us this update. I want to thank you for working here in the city, everyone, because not only is a community hearing this presentation, but there's a lot of conversations that take place behind the scenes that the community necessarily isn't privy to. And I have to tell you that it's just a wonderful staff to work with. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jesse, Javier, Steve, and the rest of the staff here, I just want to commend you for strategizing for us. When we went out to D.C. as a delegation on behalf of Pico Rivera to get dollars for our projects, like ensuring that we have an alternate access road for the sports arena after the dam is completed, getting dollars and backing for that Rosemead corridor project. And, that's all very strategic, and that's thanks to our city manager, yourself, Javier, and yourself, Jesse, for going out there and having a game plan. I know some cities do it and some don't, but I'm very proud that I belong to a city that we go out to D.C. as a group, and in fact, we went strong. We went all 5 council members and staff, but it is ensuring the longevity and the quality of life for our residents, and I hope our residents see that we represent them by going to D.C. and getting those dollars for them, and we intend to go to Sacramento and do the same. So again, thank you for all your hard work and effort that you do behind the scenes.
Mr. Mayor, can I just
Mr.
add
Mayor.
one more comment to that, only on the basis of saying how much we have to stress the reality that we need to pay attention to Sacramento. I mean, we got some good friends up there, but as you can see, 3,000 bills, and then 2,200 of them went nowhere, or they'll park, or they'll come back, 800 of them. A lot of this stuff, it just makes no sense, but from my opinion, but a lot of good stuff that we're able to take advantage of. But I'll give you an example of one in particular. Maybe I should put my glasses on. The AB 436 regarding our inability to regulate cruising. I mean, I think we're all familiar with the cruising scene, whether we participate as opponents or participate in the cruising. But for law enforcement to now be able to to prohibit them to be able to enforce. We all know, how do you get to a crowd like that when you can't regulate it? I mean, we oppose this, but again, this is a type of some of the ridiculous legislative bills that are eventually going to impact the quality of life in our community. But, so let's keep all of us very engaged in Sacramento and our federal government. So we're in that path.
Very good. And I do want to just highlight, what are the results of these visits and all the hard work that our staff puts behind the scenes? Well, again, that Paseos project, which is those alleys that we have just north of Whittier Boulevard, we're going to beautify those, and thanks to Assemblywoman Calderon, we have $850,000 to start that project. Again, beautification of the city, that's one of the priorities. And the dog park, we have $1 million that we're going to get toward that, and that's thanks to our Congresswoman Sanchez. Pico Rivera is beautifying step by step, year after year, and we're very proud of that, and we're doing it all for the residents. Councilmember Garcia.
Just real brief, I too want to commend you and thank you for that comprehensive presentation. But I'm gonna shuffle past this way right here, and it starts with our city manager, who has the ability to identify good quality workers and leadership. The Phil Jackson that we have here, he spots talent, and he pulls in a Kobe, pulls in a Shaq. He pulls in talent from all over, and we have an amazing team. So please keep up the good work.
Thank you, Councilmember.
Very good.
Thank you all.
And we do want to make sure that we applaud Assistant City Manager Angelina Garcia as well, because I don't think I've applauded you in the last month, so it's every 30 days. Right. Very good. So thank you all for that. Okay. So now moving on, Jesse, appreciate that. Moving on to the good of the order, AB 1234 reports, new business and old business. Let's keep it short. Councilmember Garcia.
Real quick, my colleague Gustavo Camacho raised this a few months back. When you look at some of our landlords out at our strip malls, some of the potholes, the striping, the signage, that needs to be up to par. We have some good landlords, and some of our landlords, we need to strengthen and nudge them. I received a call where we had someone who tripped over a pothole at one of the facilities. Right away, they want to blame the city, So if we can, Mayor, the city managers, maybe eventually get a report where we at with the strengthening an ordinance on that.
Sure, I'm bringing in Michael Jordan for that one.
Okay. All right, so we know it's going to be a slam dunk.
That's right.
There you go.
Is that all?
That's it, thank you.
Great. Okay. Councilmember Camacho.
Yeah, I just wanted to report, I attended an event at the Pico Rivera Sports Arena last Sunday. It was a week-long event to raise awareness and funding for cancer research and assistance and support of those affected by the disease. And they called it the Clásico de las Américas, Charros contra el Cáncer. And so I want to just thank Mr. Covarrubias, Jose Covarrubias, who started the Clásico de las Américas after his mother passed from the illness. And in partnership with the Lopez family, now they're 10 years in doing this annually, and this time around they've raised over $100,000 for cancer research and support for families. So it was well attended, and just congratulations to the entire team and everyone involved in this effort to raise awareness and funds for those affected by this disease. That's it, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for that. Mayor Pro Tem.
The only comment I want to make is that I agree with Councilmember Garcia. I think that's something that needs to be looked into. I think, when you go to certain strip malls, when the striping's not right, when there's trash, and it's just consistently that way, it brings blight to our city, right? Who wants to see that? Who wants to go to that shopping center? Who wants to have to deal with that? And then it's broken windows. It's trash begets more trash and more disorder. So yes, thank you for bringing that. And that's really my only comment.
Great. Mayor Pro Tem, I appreciate that. And I just want to say I did attend a 29-year anniversary for a medical practice. It was a gala, and it's called Southern California Medical Center. They've been an integral part of our community for about 26 years. So I attended their gala, and I was appreciative to go and attend. And they've been helping out our residents with medical items, and of course, anything that has to do with healthcare. Other than that, before we go over to closed session, I do want to ask the public and the staff and my colleagues if we can kindly bow our heads in memory of our Senator Dianne Feinstein and those that have passed and lost their lives in Israel over these past couple of days. Moment of silence, please. And with that, Mr. City Attorney, can you kindly take us to closed session, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As I stated earlier, there's one item that's being added to the agenda tonight. It's conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. The case is City of Pico Rivera versus 3M Corp, or Company, excuse me. That concludes my report.